Hello and welcome back to the My Betting Mate Kickoff, episode 13. We've taken a week off for the international break, but we're back and we're here to talk about all things Premier League title running and the A-League. I'm joined once again by Nick. Welcome back, Nick.
Thanks for having me again, Matt. It's been good to recharge the batteries a little bit, but now it's time for the running. This is now where every game has that little bit more meaning, and I can't wait to dive into it all.
Yeah, it's going to be a cracker episode. We're going to change things up a little bit this week, and we're going to be looking firstly and mainly at the Premier League. There's 10 games left. We've got the tightest Premier League title race at this point of the season, really in history since it became the Premier League. So we'll be looking at the top three and their 10 remaining fixtures before we have a look at the A-League's upcoming round. So, yeah, as I've mentioned, this is the tightest Premier League race with 10 games to go, just 1 point separating first and third. It's the first time this has happened in the Premier League era. And it really speaks to, I guess, not just how even these top three sides have been over the 28 games to this point, but the quality that they have at their disposal. They're all incredibly deep squads. They've all been tested in different ways this season, and it really just sets up one of the most exciting sort of 10-game run-ins that we've seen.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned it, 3 teams right in it. You very rarely see this in any league around the world. And these last 10 games, these last 2 odd months are going to be so much fun because there are so many curves and curveballs that are going to be coming in this little period that we'll talk about. All 3 of these teams, Arsenal, Liverpool, Manchester City, all have to deal with not only 10 huge league games, they've got European commitments. In the case of Manchester City, still in the FA Cup as well. It just creates that little bit of extra wrinkle. Every game's going to have that extra element of intrigue. Some of these teams do play each other as well and play some of the teams that are just waiting in the wings, your Aston Villas, your Tottenhams, your Manchester Uniteds. And every game, I mean, even if you're a team that's in the mid-table, down the bottom of the table, you would love to have a little bit of a say in the title race because you remember those games as well. You remember if you're a team that's down the bottom and your season's done, if you can knock off another side and cause a little bit of heartache, you know, it's something that you can notch up in your little belt. So it reminds me a little bit of 2016. I mean, you know, when Leicester won the title, everyone remembers that famous battle at the bridge where Chelsea finished 10th that year, but knocked Tottenham off in that draw, which basically ended their title hopes and gifted the title to Leicester.
Yeah.
There are going to be games like this, but the fact we've got 3 teams in it, I mean, it could change very quickly. It could become a 2-horse race very quickly. That's how the nature of the beast works, but it's going to be fascinating to dive into this run home.
Yeah, I mean, with 10 games left, there is still a lot of football to play. And like you say, it could very quickly become a 2-horse or even a 1-horse race. But at this point of the season, to have it this tight, you know, we've just had an international break. And it's not just, like you said, not just the league. There's just so many competing interests here. It's going to be fascinating to watch. So we'll start with Arsenal. So obviously they're top of the table at the moment, 64 points and sitting top of the tree thanks to their goal difference, which is plus 46 compared to Liverpool's plus 39. Their title running starts off with perhaps the biggest game left for them, which is Manchester City away. They follow it up with Luton before they take on Brighton, Aston Villa, Wolverhampton Wolves, Chelsea at home, Tottenham away, which will be a crucial couple of fixtures there. Bournemouth at home before they head to Old Trafford in the second last round, and they finish at home against Everton. And if you were just glancing at these fixtures, you'd probably have to say Arsenal do have probably the toughest run home.
Absolutely, they do. And on top of that, as we mentioned about that added wrinkle, Bayern Munich in the quarterfinals of the UEFA Champions League, which sit in between those games against Brighton and Wolves and Aston Villa. You know, both those legs played on April 10 and April 18. And then whatever comes afterwards. If they beat Bayern, it's more football, it's more big games for them in Europe, so it's going to create even more of a fixture headache. But yeah, this is a very tough run home because you don't just have to play your Cities, your Villas, your Chelseas, your Spurs, and your Manchester Uniteds. You've got to play teams that are battling relegation as well. Luton's not going to be easy. No. Everton on the final day, they could be desperate. You know, that game could have a twofold sort of impact. Bournemouth as well won't be easy. So there's all these games, even your Brightons and your Wolves, if they're still hanging around and trying to get into a European spot, every game's going to be massive for them. But one thing that Arsenal have done really well is they've been able to get points when it matters. They're in a really good run of form. They're probably in, when you compare everyone, the best goal-scoring form at the moment. That is why their goal difference has just shot out of a cannon recently, and that's got them above Liverpool. But it all starts with that game against Manchester City. I mean, they got memories of last year about how they were in such a good position. They fell away, and it was a loss against City that really delivered that dagger. If they can get something from that game, it will just be huge for them just to stay in it. And after that, it gets interesting from there. So I will be fascinated to see how Mikel Arteta juggles this period because of the Champions League as well. Because Bayern, they're not the Bayern Munich of old. They've had their own struggles in the Bundesliga this year. But what that means is they're going to be prioritising the Champions League because they probably can't win the Bundesliga this season. So for them, winning the Champions League becomes priority number A. So that's going to be even more intense for them. And we know the rivalry between those two teams, and Bayern have always had Arsenal's number. So, yeah, I think definitely they have got the hardest run out of all those three teams.
And a lot of it really does depend on this game against Manchester City. I feel like they really need a draw or a win there to really stay in contention with that run-in. I think it's a tough ask at City, but if they walk away from that game without any points, it's almost a death blow for them in the title race. I think the one knock I've had on them is how they sort of dealt with that festive period this year when the games were coming thick and fast. And it's not just the number of games, it's the intensity of these games now that could, be their sticking point. I hope for the title race sake that they can get a result and they can push it all the way. But I really do feel like a lot of their title hopes are going to hinge on how they fare at City in that crucial clash. We'll have a quick look at Liverpool's run-in. So they start their final 10 fixtures with Brighton at home. Then they take on Sheffield United at home. They have to go to Manchester United, where they recently lost in the Cup, so that could be a potential banana skin for them. Crystal Palace at home, Fulham away, Everton away, so always nice to have a Merseyside derby in there. West Ham away, Tottenham at home, Aston Villa away, and Wolves at home. So I know we've said Arsenal, we do think they have the toughest run-in, but it's not all easy street for Liverpool either.
No, those games against Manchester United, Tottenham and Aston Villa immediately lift up off the page. They're the ones that I think really stand out. The game against Manchester United is going to be huge, especially after that FA Cup game just before the international break, which United won, and Klopp wasn't too happy about that. They find themselves in a very, very interesting position because, again, they're still dealing with this lengthy injury list where they get some players back after the international break. It'll be a big wait and see. The kids have been really good for them, but this is going to be a big run for them. Atalanta in the Europa League as well for them. So those games come in between the United, Palace and Fulham games. Atalanta are not an easy team to beat. They are a very, very tough team and they play a very similar style to Liverpool. So those games are going to be intense. Then, of course, if they progress from there, they would have to go into a semi-final where they wouldn't have to come up against Leverkusen on that side of the draw. They get to miss Milan as well. So, it'd be interesting to see how that all plays out. But I think looking at this, Liverpool, I think, have quite a good run home. But there are some tricky fixtures in there. There's 3 away games in a row.
Yeah.
Fulham, Everton, West Ham on the road. They'll have different sort of challenges that come with them. Especially even that West Ham game. West Ham have found some form as of late. That could be a Europa League final actually there as well.
Yeah.
So I am excited to see how this plays out because, like with Liverpool, I think it all will come down to how they manage their team because with those fixtures piling up, because they've been doing it so well for so long, but can they keep it going into this final stretch? And can they do it for Klopp? That's the other bit of a subplot in this too. Can they give him one more Premier League title before he bows out?
Yeah. And I think for them, the away games are really the key. They've been faultless at home for so long now. They rarely drop points at home. It's going to be, I think that run of 3 away games in a row, particularly after the trip to Old Trafford. That's gonna really define their title chances. Manchester City, on the other hand, they start. Obviously, we've mentioned their take on Arsenal at home before they play Aston Villa at home. Palace away, Luton at home, Brighton away, Forest away, Wolves at home, Fulham away, and West Ham at home. And they also have a game against Tottenham, which will be away. Not quite scheduled in yet with the FA Cup commitments. But again, I think fair to say, not quite the Arsenal run home. Some tricky ties, but they all seem to be at home, the harder fixtures. and I guess with Spurs away being the one that stands out as maybe their toughest, other than Arsenal on the way home. But they have a stacked fixture list. They've got Champions League commitments against Real Madrid. They've got an FA Cup semi against Chelsea. So yeah, going to be pretty full on.
Yeah, it's going to be stacked. It may be the most stacked schedule out of the lot, but they have the squad to do it. They've shown it time and again that doesn't faze them. No. This is, a Manchester City team that are inevitable, and you're just waiting for them now to really kick into that next gear where they just go to a whole nother level at this point of the year. They've done it before. They've done it so many times. They, I think, have the best fixture run in terms of opponents in the league, because I think after they play Arsenal and Villa, it gets a little bit lighter in terms of playing Palace and Luton and Brighton. You play the teams where you want to play, like the tougher teams, you're playing them at home, which certainly helps. But that Spurs game is a wild card in of itself.
Yeah.
And I think that that they would back themselves to at least get to the final of the FA Cup coming up against Chelsea. And then, of course, the Champions League, that is a bloody tough tie against Real Madrid, is it not? You're coming up against the team that is the final boss of the UEFA Champions League, the team that, have always been there. And we remember 2 seasons ago what they did to Manchester City. So I think for Guardiola as well, he'd be remembering that, and he'd want to go and try to get back-to-back Champions League successes as well. Whether they can weather all of that, I think they can, because they've done it before. Yeah. And I have very little reason to doubt that they can't do it again this year.
I'm at the point now where I think if they beat Arsenal, they're pretty much favourites to go on and win it. The sooner in this run-in they get the title race back on their own boot and not relying on other results,
then it's over. I think.
It's over. Yeah. As soon as it's on their foot, I think they run away with it, to be honest. But even I guess if there was any potential hiccups, that Luton game, as much as that seems like a lock at home, that is sandwiched in between their games against Real Madrid. It's definitely going to be something of a rotated squad there. And I think, that could be a potential hiccup for them. But having said that, I mean, their squad is so deep. I think I'm really stretching to find some drama in that run-in.
But you never know. That's the beauty of this. You just never know. Yeah. I mean, a team like Luton being desperate at this point in the year, we've seen how many times relegation battlers throughout history in the Premier League cause these stirs right at the end where they, play spoiler. It reminds me, and this is a bit closer to my heart, but when Wigan used to be in the Premier League at this point in the year with them, when they were battling survival, they'd find a way to beat everybody at the top part. There was a time they beat your Arsenals, your Uniteds, your Liverpools, and that teams can find that extra gear because they're desperate. Like, they're fighting for their lives. So those games against Forest and against Luton, they're going to have that extra little bit of gravity because it's do or die for them. So as much as it's do or die for City, they know they're going to be in the Premier League next season. Yeah. But Luton and Forest, they don't know when their next time might be in the Premier League. If they go down, there is no guarantee they're coming straight back up. So they're going to be very interesting ties for different reasons because of just have that extra little bit of desperation on the line. You might see a Luton try and play quite defensive, maybe try and just get a point, but we'll see how it all goes.
So with 10 games remaining, we've had now a look at, I guess, those top 3 in their run-ins home. Who do you think wins it?
Oh, I think City do it. Yeah. They're going to do it again, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's an inevitability, but I would like to exercise the option of revisiting this in about 5 weeks' time.
Because we're going to be doing these every week.
Yeah,
so
I do get a feeling that, look, if you're making me choose now, it's City just based on history.
Yeah.
But based on, you take everything out. The team that I'd love to see win it is Arsenal, just for the sake of someone different. Great story if they finally won the Premier League after 20 years.
Yeah.
But City just go to another level. Liverpool is still Liverpool. But those European fixtures are just going to add that little bit of an extra wrinkle to it.
They're the big wild card at the moment, aren't they?
Because you go a bit further, it's more games, high-octane games, energy's high. You have to bounce back after a few days. It's tough. It's tough on the body.
Yeah. I find it hard to see past Manchester City at this point as well. I guess as a United fan, I think Arsenal's the one I wouldn't mind winning out of those 3, but there's just an inevitability around City. But I do think a lot hinges on this Arsenal game.
Yeah.
Not necessarily to win the league, but to decide, how long can Arsenal stay in this race, or can City sort of run off with it from here? So definitely be one to look out for. We'll have a look at match day 30 in the Premier League and a couple of catch-up fixtures that are scheduled in for early next week. So it all starts with Newcastle taking on West Ham. Newcastle probably, pretty disappointing season for them, all things considered, when you think of the hype that came into this season with the new ownership, the sort of transfer window they had.
The post-game photos in the dressing room after every single win that we used to see plastered over social media. They were loving themselves for a while at Newcastle.
Yeah. So how do you see this game going?
I think West Ham win this one.
Yeah.
Tough away trip, but West Ham hit some good form before the international break, and I think they'll be too strong for Newcastle, who I think are reeling a little bit at the moment.
Yeah, I think with the home factor, I might tip a draw here, but there's really not a result that would overly surprise me, which is why I'm going to go for a draw, I think. Bournemouth taking on Everton at Vitality.
Oh, this is a tough one. Two desperate teams. They need points. I'm going to go a draw in this one. 1-1 draw.
Yep, I'm tipping Bournemouth to win at home. I've got Chelsea versus Burnley next up.
Chelsea win this one. I think Burnley right now, they were a bit better before the break, but Chelsea, I think, going to be too strong at home.
Yep, Chelsea at home is my tip there as well. Nottingham Forest taking on Crystal Palace.
Forest having that points deduction right during the break. Big blow for them and their survival hopes. Palace have had a bit of a bounce under Oliver Glasner. I think they win this game. Close one, but they do beat Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if this points deduction has a similar sort of rallying effect.
You'd hope it does, yeah.
Like Everton sort of bounced from. It's a really bizarre season. It's like asterisks everywhere, especially at that bottom end of the table. And I'm sure there's going to be appeals. It's going to be really interesting to see how
it could be decided after the season's done, which is crazy. Imagine you stay up, but then, there's a deduction that comes off or something.
Correct.
It's just absolutely bonkers.
Yeah. Well, I do think Crystal Palace have enough about them to win this one as well. So Sheffield United take on Fulham.
Fulham for me. I think Sheffield United, as we've spoken about a lot, they're getting ready for life in the Championship, and I think Fulham are going to be too strong.
Yeah, I think Fulham are their own worst enemy here. If anyone's going to lose this game, it's going to be Fulham losing it for themselves. But I do think they'll have enough about them to beat Sheffield United. Spurs take on Luton.
Spurs for me, they will bounce back and come away with a good win. I think they'll be disappointed how they went into the break. So coming back out of it with a result against Luton, a team that is desperate, but back at home, I think Tottenham are going to be too good.
Yep, Spurs for me as well. Aston Villa taking on Wolves at Villa Park. Villa, a little bit up and down in recent times, but they're still there or thereabouts in the European race.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very, very fascinating game because Wolves have been in some good form. Villa, obviously, in the driver's seat for fourth. Going to go a draw here. Going to go a 2-2 draw in this game. I reckon it's going to be a highly entertaining draw between these two teams.
Yeah, I'm backing Villa in for the win here. I think they get the job done. Brentford taking on Manchester United.
Oh.
United up and about after an FA Cup win over Liverpool. That's always a good way to sort of reignite your season. I think, they've probably left it a bit late for the top four. They'll be hoping that fifth spot does sneak into the Champions League, perhaps. But I do think they can beat Brentford away.
Yeah, I think United win this game, buoyed by that really good win for them against Liverpool. I think the eggs in the basket now go into the FA Cup, and as you said, just trying to get fifth. And I think they'd fancy themselves to win the FA Cup as well, given their draw, given who's remaining and where their priorities may lie. Like if they come up against a City team that might have one eye on the title, I mean that's going to create another interesting wrinkle. But I think United will come away with a win here.
Yeah, it'll be interesting for sure. Liverpool take on Brighton. Ooh. It's at Anfield. I struggle to tip against Liverpool.
Yeah, Liverpool win this game.
Yeah,
comfortably.
Yeah, and then finally Manchester City
the big one
versus Arsenal, the very big one. Very tough game. I've ummed and ahed about this one before we jumped on, so now I'm sort of struggling to make my final decision. But I think I'll stick with my first thought, which was a draw. How do you think it's going to go?
Going a draw. We're going to have as much drama as possible. It will be a happy weekend for Liverpool fans because they'll go back to the top of the table. But I think we're going to get a draw here. I can't separate the two teams.
Yeah. And there's a couple of catch-up games before we probably record next, so we'll just fly through those. Arsenal v Luton Town at the Emirates.
Arsenal win that game.
Yep, Arsenal for me too. Man City v Aston Villa at Etihad.
City win.
Yep, City win for me too there. And Liverpool taking on Sheffield United at Anfield.
The Reds easy. It could get ugly, I think, at Anfield, to be honest.
Imagine if Sheffield's the reason they don't win the league.
Well, after watching Sheffield United against Arsenal the other week,
Yeah, probably.
I'd be very surprised. But God, it would be an amazing story if they were able to cause a bit of a shock.
Yeah, Liverpool for me there as well. We'll look a bit closer to home. The A-League's getting back into gear after the international break. We're in this weird period now with the A-League where sort of final picture looks relatively sort of made up. There's not a heap of drama in the race for the Premier's plate either. So we'll just run through these fixtures and see what sort of talking points come up. We've got Adelaide United taking on Western United at Cooper Stadium.
Yeah, both teams at the moment just playing for a bit of pride. Adelaide got that win against the Jets before the break. Western United, I think, hit some good form. It's, I think, a much better period now for Western United because they know that they're going home finally. They're going to be finally playing out of Tarneet to end this season. As I said, there's a lot of green shoots about how they've ended this period, but I still think they'd be disappointed that they've dropped so many points in this run home. This whole season, they've been in so many games, and they probably feel, having spoken to some people, they feel that they are better than where they're at. Cooper Stadium, it's going to be tough. I'm going to draw here. A 2-2 draw for me. A very entertaining game, but I can't split these two teams at the moment.
Yeah, Draw's probably where I wanted to go, but I'll be a bit different. I think Adelaide will get it done at home.
Okay.
But I do think, it's been a much better sort of end to the season for Western. Some of the kids have looked quite good, so perhaps they just chalk this season up as one, that sets them up well for next year. But, I do think Adelaide can get the job done at home. Melbourne City versus Newcastle Jets. City well and truly back in the finals race. I think Western Sydney's form sort of helped them out quite a bit as well. Do you see City getting the win here?
I think so. That big win against the Wanderers before the break certainly helped them. I mean, I know the Wanderers did get that win against Perth, but City having that game in hand is massive. Yeah. And I think they'll go to Amy Park, where they've been quite, despite all their struggles, they've been pretty good at home. Yeah. The Jets have been quite disappointing to end this season. It's a tough time for Newcastle, we must acknowledge. Really tough. And, for all Jets fans, feel for them at the moment. The future of the club is up in the air right now. So you'd hope that maybe the players can rally and try find something to salvage from this season. But coming up against City, I think it's just going to be a bridge too far and City's going to be too strong. Yeah,
hard to see past Melbourne City at Amy Park. Sydney FC versus Central Coast Mariners. An interesting game from the point of view of maybe a bit of a finals preview and a game we might see later in the year. But I'm not... Yeah, this is a hard one to tip.
Massive game for both teams because the Mariners have a game in hand on Wellington. They're 3 points behind. They're in a position still where they are in control of their premiership destiny. But Sydney have been one of the better teams outside the top two now for quite some time. This is going to be a cracker at Allianz Stadium because the only team to beat the Mariners since round 4 was Sydney FC in Gosford. So them coming up now playing in Sydney, it adds that little bit of an extra wrinkle. I'm going to go on a whim here and say that I think we'll see this match up again in finals. I think if it's a semi or if it's a grand final, I think we will see it again. I can't split them though. I'm going to draw in this game as well. I think it's going to set up for what will be another meeting later in the year in the finals, and that's when things will get very interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think I'm tipping Sydney at home, and I do think it might set up a bit of a narrative for the finals. It might be that Sydney
the bogey team, you think?
The bogey team, a bit of kryptonite for Central Coast. So Sydney for me. Wellington Phoenix taking on Brisbane Roar.
I think this is actually a bit of a fun fact. One of the earliest kickoffs in A-League men's history. Right. So it's an 11 a.m. kickoff for us here in Melbourne on Easter Sunday. So for those getting up, so for us getting up, if you've got your Easter Sunday lunch and you want a bit of A-League football, whack it on the TV. So an early kickoff for those across the ditch. Wellington for me win this game. Brisbane, their finals hopes are hanging by a thread now. Yeah. I think that Wellington can really put the final dagger in their hearts with a big win here. And if results go their way, they could really kick clear in that premiership race, even with the Mariners having that game in hand, which we'll talk about in a sec. It would be massive for them to come away with a win. And if the home fans can get behind them, there were 18,000 fans in Auckland for that last game against Sydney that they played. get behind them, get down to the cake tin, because it's a good feeling around Wellington at the moment. And there hasn't been a lot of good feeling around these teams this year, but Wellington have been the great story of the league. And I think they're going to come away with a win on Easter.
Interesting crowd number with the Auckland game, given there's, Auckland's getting its own team next year. So it'll be interesting to see.
It's good news for Auckland, at least, yeah.
Will they stick or twist? That'll be interesting to see. And then we've got Melbourne Victory taking on Perth also on Easter Sunday at Amy Park. It's interesting game, but I do think Victory should win at Amy Park.
Yeah, I think the wind has come out of the sails of Perth Glory. They rode that bit of a wave. Similarly, talking about teams that galvanise when there's a bit of uncertainty. We've spoken about it at length. I think Glory would be happy that they know their future is secured and they're going to be around now for the long haul with Ross Peligra coming in. Victory need to win this game. It was a disappointing draw against Western United before the break where they dropped 2 points late again. They need to win this game to really now switch their focus from top two to just getting a home elimination final and really keep themselves clear of Melbourne City in that race. Don't want to get dragged too close to it. So I think Victory win this game in a tight result, but I think they'll do just enough.
Yeah, Victory for me, as I mentioned. Macarthur FC take on Western Sydney Wanderers. I'm struggling to tip Western Sydney in anything at the moment, so Macarthur FC for me.
Well, this is a rematch of the famous stigma match that we saw a few months ago. This exact same fixture at Campbelltown Stadium. Easter Monday, so Macarthur Mondays is back. I hope that there's a good turnout there because that was sort of their marquee fixture at that point that people got down to Campbelltown. It's a good feeling around Macarthur this year. They've had a very good season. And I got no reason to tip against them again. I know the Wanderers had that bounce against Perth Glory, but Macarthur have been very good at home, and I think they're going to continue the good form and come away with a win against the Wanderers.
Yep. We mentioned the game in hand for Central Coast Mariners. They take on Melbourne City on Tuesday, April 2 at home. Very interesting fixture. Talking about, games that might pop up in finals, this is another one to probably watch out for. How do you see this one unfolding?
There's a lot of narrative between these two teams. Yeah. There's a big narrative. We know what happened in that grand final last year. They've played each other twice since. This last time they played each other was a very spicy game in Gosford. There were a few spot fires. These two teams don't like each other, and it's good to see we've got a bit of a rivalry there, a bit of a rivalry that's emerged over the last little bit. This is a very tough game to pick because Melbourne City, that one team that no one will want to play in finals if they get there. The Mariners are that one team that they're the team that I think everyone's expecting going to kick right on this little period, even with AFC Cup duties. I think this also ends in a draw. I think it's going to set things up nicely for a potential rematch come finals time. And, we get a draw in this game. And I think that Melbourne City will be kicking themselves, missing a great opportunity to maybe kick clear of the Wanderers or get ahead of them, whatever it might be. But this could be the game that really, depending on what happens on the weekend, that might, I wouldn't say secure a final spot for Melbourne City, but really grab a hold of their destiny as they look to, not return to the finals, but make it 10 straight years in the finals.
Yep. And then the last game we'll look at is Perth Glory v Sydney FC, which takes place on Wednesday, April 3, which would be just before we catch up again. Obviously, a fair bit of football to be played before these two meet, but how do you see it playing out?
Oh, Perth have been good at home, but that loss against the Wanderers can't be forgotten. Sydney riding some good form. Sydney having the extra day break as well. Perth having to fly back from Melbourne. I think Sydney FC win this game. Yeah,
I've got Sydney FC there as well. Well, that wraps up a big episode. A lot of Premier League talk this week. We'll have a lot more A-League for you next week once this round's in the books. But Nick, thanks for joining me again.
No, thank you, Matt. Can't wait for the action this weekend.
Make sure you keep a lookout for the football columns on My Betting Mate, and we'll see you next week.